In episode 6, we get to see how Carrie Astor, played by Amy Forsyth, is just as much under her mother's thumb as Gladys.
The fact is, I have a very difficult mother.
Carrie Astor is a nickname for Caroline Astor, but since that was her mother's name as well, we will stick to calling her Carrie to avoid confusion. So far in the show, we haven't the new money family should be excluded from the old money society of which Carrie is a part. We don't know this yet, but Carrie has more than one reason to want the new money. In conversation with Gladys, Carrie reveals that her tears are over a man, but the man's name is not spoken. One thing we can be sure of at this point is that Carrie's love interest is not Larry Russell, as some fans had hoped. If he were the man Carrie spoke of, then he would linger longer by her side rather than go off to meet other friends at the party. Now we can look into history and get a glimpse of what is ahead in Carrie Astor's storyline. If the TV production follows history accurately, then Carrie will marry the man she is crying over, but not just yet. It will take a couple of years before Carrie Astor would marry a man who would be from a new money family. A man her mother is entirely against because he is the son of a Southerner and Civil War profiteer whose reputation was as tainted as all the other robber barons of that era. His name was Marshall Orme Wilson, and they married on November 18, 1884 at the Astor Mansion, but not without some effort on Carrie's part to get her mother's approval. In the book, John Jacob Astor, America's First Multimillionaire by Axel Madsen, it is said that Carrie starved herself into bulimia until her mother gave in and agreed to the marriage. Another account of Mrs. Astor's attempts to stop Carrie from marrying new money said that Carrie begged and begged her mother, so Mrs. Astor came up with what she thought was a devious plan. She said, "Okay, you can get married if the Wilsons can match your $500,000 dowry." Mrs. Astor was sure that would never happen since the Wilson family patriarch was said to have lost a great portion of his original fortune. What was once a multi-million-dollar empire was reduced to around $1 million when Mrs. Astor made her conditions known. So who were these Wilsons of New York's Gilded Age? At the time of Carrie's growing love interest in Marshall Wilson, he was a banker in his father's firm of R.T. Wilson and Company, which would seem on the surface respectable enough to warrant entry into old New York society. R.T. Wilson, the patriarch of the nouveau riche Wilson family, was the son of a Scottish tanner. Before he made his riches, R.T. was born in Georgia and spent time as a traveling salesman until the Civil War brought him the opportunity to strike it rich. First serving on the staff of the Commissary General of the Confederate States of America, Wilson was later sent to London by the Confederate government to dispose of the cotton crop. At the end of the war, he was said to have returned to America, $500,000 richer. After the war ended, Wilson began buying up defunct railroads. He moved to New York City and purchased a mansion at 511 Fifth Avenue that placed him squarely in the sphere of old New York society. Wilson then opened the banking firm of Wilson Galloway and Company, which would later become R.T. Wilson and Company, which brings us to R.T. Wilson's son, Marshall Orme Wilson. Marshall Wilson graduated from Columbia University in 1882 before joining his father's firm as a banker. 2 years later, after his marriage to Carrie, the couple moved into a new home at 414 Fifth Avenue, purchased and furnished by her father for them as a wedding present. After that, Carrie and Marshall built a mansion that was completed in 1903 at 3 East 64th Street on the Upper East Side of Manhattan in New York City. So if the HBO show The Gilded Age follows history, we can expect that Carrie will indeed marry the man she loves, sooner or later. From history, we know that Carrie married Marshall Orme Wilson in the Astor Mansion on the afternoon of November 18, 1884. The New York Times called it the principal social event of the season and reported that the ceremony was witnessed by hundreds in the art gallery ballroom and nearly 1,000 more at the reception. The Times article spent copious column space describing room after room of floral decorations, including such detail as the chandeliers being covered in masses of large pink roses, rose foliage, and Japanese ferns. It was reported that Carrie's gown was bedecked with diamonds and orange blossoms, accompanied by a $75,000 necklace draped across the bride's bodice. Every opulent gift was on display for everyone to admire, and not a prominent name was missing from the assembled guests. In the fall of 1906, Carrie's mother showed signs of a nervous breakdown. Soon after, her condition continued to decline, and she was rarely seen in public. Caroline Schermerhorn Astor died at 7:30 that evening, with Carrie as the only family member at her side. The reign of the old money was ending. The turn of the century brought changes, even though the matrons of high society did their best to hold on, but as far as Carrie was concerned, she was not interested. Unlike her mother, Carrie's lavish entertainments were used in the service of charitable causes. In the new mansion that she and her husband had built at 3 East 64th Street in Manhattan, Carrie would hold creative and elaborate functions such as the one in January 1913. The event was for the support of a district nurse in the babies' ward of the New York Postgraduate Medical School and Hospital. On that day, Carrie presented entertainment from recruited wealthy socialites and their children who posed as reproductions of paintings by famous masters. When World War I broke out, Carrie turned her focus to war causes, including an event for the benefit of a group of students and their families attending the National School of Fine Arts in Paris. A stage was constructed in the Wilsons' ballroom. The first part of the program was a concert, and in the second part, there was a theater presentation of a one-act comedy. In January 1919, Carrie had some of her friends over on a Thursday afternoon to hear a captain of the British Army tell of his experiences in German prison camps, in which he was confined 14 months. After the war, Carrie became interested in the construction of the Cathedral of St. John the Divine. She brought architect Ralph Adams Cram to her house to give a lecture talking about the cathedral. The construction project became one of Carrie Wilson's favored causes, and she would host the sewing class of the Fresh Air Association of the Cathedral of St. John the Divine for years. Marshall Orme Wilson died in their house on East 64th Street on April 1, 1926. Carrie continued to live in the house alone with her staff, ultimately resuming her charity teas and entertainments. Among her later interests was the New York Women's League for Animals, which met regularly in the Wilson Mansion. Carrie lived another 22 years after her husband's death and died on September 13, 1948, at the age of 87 at the home of her son Richard at 1 Sutton Place. At the time of her death, she was the last surviving child of her parents. After a funeral at Trinity Church, she was buried alongside her husband at Woodlawn Cemetery in the Bronx. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos on the many fabulous, fierce, and feisty women in history.